Hey, it's Jordan, and I'm here with two wonderful women. You guys are with a lot of other Hoosiers going to be storming the gates this week of the Capitol. Obviously, there's a lot of issues going on in Indiana. I was there last 2016 and 2017 covering one, which is the lead crisis in East Chicago, but the opioid epidemic, which is ravaging a lot of different places, has really hit the Rust Belt in particular. I'm sure Indiana. So tell me and the audience about what you guys are going to be doing, the who, what, where, why, and when, and a little more about that. Oh, and
Sure.
we got Hannah and we got Kate.
Yep. So my name is Kate Hess Pace. I'm the director of Hoosier Action, and we're a membership-based organization that does community organizing across southern Indiana. So we are about a year old and wanted to construct kind of a working families agenda that people could fight for, and quickly realized through talking to lots of people that there's no way to work in Indiana, to live in Indiana without encountering the opioid crisis. Like it just has touched every corner of the state. And we've seen kind of a somewhat lackluster response from our legislators, and also a pivot towards a lock 'em up frame. So we're trying to figure out and push our legislators to have a compassionate response that emphasizes evidence-based treatment instead of more incarceration, which we deem costly and ineffective and inhumane. So this Tuesday, and I'll let Hannah talk more about it too, who's one of our members leading it with several other people. It's the second to last day of our legislative session, and they are moving a package of bills around opioids, including one that's a drug-induced homicide bill that brings the charges of murder if you give or sell drugs to someone and they overdose. And we are tremendously worried about the impacts of this, both in preventing people from calling 911 if there's overdoses, and already clogging up at capacity prison system, and not opening up more doors to recovery and treatment for those that want it. So we are doing our own people's hearing at the state capitol that Hannah and several others are leading. And then we are doing an action at Governor Holcomb's office, asking him to not sign this bill. Do you want to talk some about the hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah, first and foremost, just so the audience has it, because we got a lot of people in the Midwest, where at the Capitol, what time, all those good things.
You know that.
Yeah. So the the hearing is going to be from 1:30 to 2:30, but the whole day of action where we talk to Joe Donnelly and Governor Holcomb, and we're going to go and talk to Trey Hollingsworth also. The whole thing is going to be from 12 to 5. So it's going to be in the north atrium of the Capitol building. That's where we're all going to get together, and there's going to be several different speakers that are going to give their interpretation and their how it's affected them, the opioid epidemic, and what kind of, basically just pushing for compassion and treatment and recovery over criminalization and incarceration.
And we'll have a Narcan training too.
Yeah.
I want to get to the efforts to criminalize it in a second, but I want to kind of tailor it to Indiana for a second. So when I was at the Young Turks and I was pretty much reporting in the Midwest predominantly on the campaign and then after. So Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana. And I saw kind of the connection between the decimation of the middle class, which has happened there for 30 years, and the spike in opioids. Obviously, there's a connection between not having a job or having to work 2 to 3, having no health care or crap health care, to getting hooked on these drugs. I mean, I myself had a real bad issue with Ambien. I was hospitalized. A lot of people don't know that. Kind of talk about to legislators, Donnelly, these people, what is the message? Because it seems to me they're focusing specifically on the opioids, but they're not focusing on a lot of the underlying reasons that are helping to cause this.
So I think in part of the opioid epidemic is analogous to the foreclosure crisis, where a set of private investors pushed out a product onto people who in Southern Indiana were often, like you're right, faced with like low wage work and not a lot of hope going forward. And that pushing of a product at a time when people are particularly vulnerable and unhappy and full of despair exploded and created a lot of addiction. And there hasn't been a like compensation or any charges brought against these pharmaceutical companies. And instead, much of the response has been to increase incarceration and not open up more doors to treatment. And we talk about the opioid crisis as very much connected to our fight on Medicaid that we've been waging for the last year, because Medicaid is the only path to treatment for a lot of people. And then this, for us, our day of action is focused both on opioids, but also on a slate of economic justice campaigns that we're trying to push both Donnelly, our congressional rep, and our state legislative body on. And they are very much connected. You want to add anything?
Well, I'm kind of relatively new to this organization, but I have a history of addiction with opioids, and which led to a lot of other drugs also. But I think of the high majority of people that end up on heroin, which a lot of people are dying from fentanyl and stuff like that. I think it's somewhere in the 80s where most of them started on pain pills, on prescription pain pills. I know I did when I got my wisdom teeth taken out. And I think that these drugs, I know we're like 5% of the population, and I know in the United States we can consume 90% of opioids made. So I think for me that's a big focus, is these pill mills and these, Pfizer and Sackler and Purdue Pharma that are, kind of brainwashing people to think that these aren't extremely addictive and very similar to heroin. So, yeah.
And, I just watched a documentary. It's called Dirty Money. It's all about the corrupt oligarchy. And Valiant, the drug company that shot up this medication, it wasn't opioids, but it was for, basically they had a monopoly on a life-saving drug for certain people with a certain specific illness. And they shot it up, I think, 750%. And technically, by the letter of the law, it was legal for them. And we have legalized bribery in this country, clearly. So, I just did a segment the other day. You got Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill's ranting on Morning Joe against pharmaceutical companies. Her seventh largest donor is a pharmaceutical company. We could fill in the blank. So when you're trying to address, Senator Donnelly, Governor Holcomb, obviously the vice president was once governor there. Are you kind of giving them data, personal stories? What's that kind of message to politicians who clearly like taking money from big pharma?
I think our approach as organizers is multifaceted. So one, we are trying to continually tell the real story of impacted people through the opioid crisis and through drug use in general, to change the narrative about who uses drugs and what kind of compassion they need. And then we also are lining up lots of experts who bills like 1359 that the governor is likely to sign that increase incarceration have zero evidence backing up that they do anything to stem drug use, to save lives. And so it's an uphill battle, but we really are trying to, like, as much as possible, change the narrative about who are the victims and who are the real culprits of what is really the worst public health crisis our state has ever seen. Also exasperated by former Governor Pence.
Yes, it would be a whole longer video if we got into that humanitarian. I want to tell the audience, and maybe you guys have some thoughts. I'm reading from futurism.com. The CDC obviously released a report very recently, actually, and it said between July 2016 and September 2017, 30% increase in overdoses showing up in emergency rooms having to do with opioids. But there's also several reasons why the epidemic's getting worse. On one hand, you have insurers will not cover alternative treatments. So for people affected by chronic pain, many options other than addictive painkillers, including Kratom, which I just tried for my back. But obviously, like we were just talking about, Big Pharma is monopolizing a lot of the Congress, so they are saying that certain things that are natural or there's no real data to say it's dangerous are a risk. Also, NPR noted how easy it is to get stronger illegal opioids such as fentanyl, which is very pervasive. And also, according to research recently published on the Pediatrics Journal, the number of children between the age of 1 and 17 who have been admitted to hospitals for opioid overdose has nearly doubled from 797 patients between 2004 and 2007 to 1,504 patients between 2012 and 2015. I bring those up because, not that I'm pushing Kratom or anything else, but is there a thought to suggesting other things, whether it be medication or certain types of treatment? There's also been talk about cognitive behavioral therapy and many other things. I'm not pushing one. What's your thoughts on that in pushing other things than opioids?
Yeah, we haven't necessarily done a lot of work with Hoosier Action on the benefits of marijuana as opposed to opioids, but I'm kind of doing some work with that at my school at IUPUI.
If you need a test case, I just got really, really high when my back was hurting, and it was fantastic.
Perfect. Yeah.
It really took away the pain. So yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and it's non-addictive, and there's just so many benefits to marijuana, but it's still considered, on the same level as all these other drugs. But I think a lot of it is access to treatments and then people's insurance. That's why we're pushing for Medicaid. I've known several people that have tried extremely hard to get into rehabs, but they're getting kicked out. They're not getting treated fairly at these rehabs. They're just for money reasons, or they're getting put in jail, and they're getting criminalized, and they're not getting jobs. But I think there's so many different options, but we need to at least just take one or a few to help these. And then there's like needle exchange. I know that's kind of a hot topic, and a lot of people think that it's just getting more people to use drugs, but it's like in Scott County in Indiana, there's a huge HIV outbreak, and they opened up a needle exchange. But I think that the main, yes, there's needles being passed out, and of course this is stopping the spread of HIV and hepatitis and stuff like that. But I think the main point underneath all of that is you're showing these people compassion, and you're showing that you care, and that does wonders. It's not just like, here's this needle. It's not like they're thinking, oh wow, these people care, and we're recognizing that they have a problem, and we want to help them, and that's just one step that is beneficial in many ways, a needle exchange. And
we partner with the Indiana Recovery Alliance, which is a harm reduction coalition, is working to build statewide, and has worked on needle exchanges, safe injection sites, and makes a big distinction between chaotic drug use and drug use that is controlled and where people feel cared for, and they can keep people alive. And that is part of what we're trying to do, is figure out, whatever the strategy is, how do we keep people alive and value that human life that we're losing.